That painful bark shattered the stillness, snapping Sergeant Edward Mallory's attention like a whip crack in the cold morning air. It wasn't just a dog's cry, it was a call for help. Desperate, wounded, and raw. And for a royal guard who was trained to stay stoic and immobile at his post, this sound pierced through every ounce of discipline he had. But instinct overruled protocol. Breaking formation, boots striking the stone with sharp intent, Edward turned and followed the haunting cry through the courtyard, past stunned tourists and wide-eyed children, beyond the arches of the parade ground. What he found on the other side changed everything. There, crumpled on the pavement like a shadow thrown too hard, was a wounded German shepherd. His black and tan coat was matted with blood, soaked into the fur around his legs and abdomen. His breathing was rapid and shallow. And yet, there was a fire still flickering in those amber eyes. A flicker of purpose, of duty. A tattered K9 vest hung loose on his body, the edges torn from some violent encounter. The insignia, faded but unmistakable, confirmed what Edward already knew. This wasn't a stray. This was a trained military dog. A comrade in arms. A soldier. Edward dropped to his knees. A crowd had begun to gather, whispering, filming, unsure of what to make of a royal guard breaking the rules. But Edward didn't care. At that moment, the only thing that mattered was the bleeding warrior before him. He spoke softly but firmly. "You're going to be okay, buddy. I've got you." Years of military training rushed back to him like muscle memory. He assessed the injuries quickly. Deep lacerations to the hind leg, signs of internal bleeding in the abdomen, shock setting in. His gloved hands moved without hesitation. He pulled off his belt and fashioned it into a makeshift tourniquet above the dog's leg. From inside his overcoat, he retrieved a compact emergency med kit. He wasn't supposed to carry it while in uniform, but he always did. Some said it was over-preparation. He called it responsibility. The dog whimpered but didn't fight. He trusted the man who was saving him. "Easy now. You're not alone," Edward whispered, pressing gauze into the wound, blood staining his hands. "You held on this long. You're not giving up now." A few onlookers finally snapped out of their daze. One woman brought over a bottle of water and knelt beside Edward, hands trembling. Others called emergency services. But Edward's voice cut through the panic again, firm and commanding. "Stop filming and clear the area. This isn't a show. This is a soldier in distress." Minutes felt like hours. And then, footsteps thundered in from behind. A plainclothes officer sprinted into view, eyes wide, voice hoarse. "Brutus!" he gasped. "That's Brutus, our K9. He went missing during a raid 3 nights ago. We thought he was gone." Edward looked down, heart breaking and swelling all at once. Brutus had survived whatever nightmare he'd been through, clawed his way through wreckage, injury, chaos, and dragged himself back toward the one place he remembered as safe. To the palace. To the guards. To Edward. Veterinary response units arrived minutes later. Edward stayed crouched at Brutus's side, one hand gently stroking the dog's head, the other gripping his paw. "You held the line, soldier. Now let them do their job. You've earned your rest." The vet team worked quickly, stabilizing Brutus enough to lift him into the emergency van. Before the doors closed, Edward leaned in and whispered, "Hang on. I'll see you soon." The story exploded across social media within hours. Photos emerged, raw, powerful. A royal guard, known for never moving an inch, kneeling in blood-soaked uniform beside a dying K9. Headlines spread like wildfire. Royal Guard breaks formation to save wounded war dog, a true act of honor. He knelt for a comrade, not for cameras. Some heroes salute, some bleed. The public was moved. Tributes poured in from veterans, first responders, animal rights groups, and everyday people around the world. But Edward remained silent. When reporters cornered him for a statement, he simply said, "He would have done the same for me." Days passed, then weeks. Brutus underwent surgery after surgery, enduring it all with the same stubborn will that had carried him through his escape. Edward visited him after every shift, sometimes in full uniform, sometimes in civilian clothes, always with the same promise whispered into Brutus's ear. "You're not done yet, warrior. You've still got more to give." And then, one afternoon, in a quiet recovery ward, Brutus stood, unsteady, limping, but proud, strong. The next day, the unit brought him back to the palace courtyard, not for duty, but for reunion. Brutus spotted Edward from across the cobblestones. The people fell silent as the dog walked forward, step by step, until he reached the man who'd saved him. And there, in front of the same crowd that once watched in confusion, Brutus bowed his head. Edward dropped to his knees again, this time with tears in his eyes and peace in his chest. "You made it," he whispered, "just like I promised." A few weeks later, with approval from the K9 division and the palace, Brutus was officially retired and adopted by Edward. From that day forward, they were inseparable. Brutus traded his vest for a collar, his assignments for long walks through quiet parks, his stress for belly rubs and warm fires. But the soldier in him never faded. Every morning, as Edward put on his uniform and stepped into formation, Brutus would sit just behind the gates, watching, guarding, as if to say, "I'm still on duty." Because some bonds are forged in fire, others in compassion. And some soldiers don't need words. Just trust, just loyalty, just love. Brutus never left Edward's side again. And Edward, he never let anyone forget that bravery doesn't always come with medals. Sometimes, it comes with a bark.